this is why crypto is so crucial.
It's like a loop that you can't get out of, because they just
Mm-hmm.
printed 40% of the US dollar supply in the last 18 months. And we're going to keep saying that over and over and over again until everyone gets it. And
100%.
so there's two taxes. There's the hidden tax of inflation, and there's the in-your-face tax of actual tax, state, federal, whatever else. And so like you're running around in a circle that you can never catch up to.
Yep. Not to mention, every time they get those loans, they continually just loan on loan on loan on loan, which just that original 40% just continues to grow, which is just crazy.
It just keeps stacking on itself, right?
Yeah.
And where are they actually? So like from an inflation standpoint, you got to look at this too, and we talk about this often, is that where you are in relation to the inflation affects you negatively or positively. Sometimes it's a benefit, sometimes it's not. And in terms of Hex, it's actually a benefit because you're the direct beneficiary of that inflation. Well, when they print this money at a federal level, roll it out at the banks, and then the banks seep this out and they tack on interest on top of it and roll this out through loan vehicles, you're like so far away from that inflation that all it's actually acting as is what? A tax. That's why this works. That's how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas so that's the difference. I'm the first person in line and I'm almost the last person in line. That's the difference between Hex and the US dollar.
Yep. And also, I was doing a bunch of research on this recently, right? It's the concept and the difference between, there's actually two types of inflation. There's monetary inflation, which is people just printing currency, and there's price inflation. And when everybody thinks about inflation, they actually think about price inflation. And they think the only reason why we have price inflation is because the government prints money, which it does result in price inflation, but really it's the fractional reserve system that really starts to devalue the dollar over time.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about Hex is Hex has monetary inflation, but that monetary inflation is locked in at a rate that's depicted by code, right? 3.69% monetary inflation. And then we fight price inflation by the locked rate of 3.69%. And the delay of gratification that pushes most of that inflation out to the future, right? Because monetary inflation isn't always necessarily a bad thing, because it's trying to keep up within an organic system of babies being born and new people coming into the country. Like, it makes sense, but the problem is when you have a society or a people group that is not growing as fast as inflation. So that's where price inflation really starts to hit. The beautiful thing about Hex is because it's pushing out a lot of that inflation to the future, it actually allows the people group or the users of that network to grow at a rate that keeps up with the growth of inflation. So it's just so important to get that, because I think at first, when especially the people I talk to, when I say, Hex inflates, they automatically think price inflation and they think bad, which just isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah, I should pull up that chart, right?
I mean, there's a lot of economists that fall for that. I mean, even some of the people that we've been talking to on DS, and they're smart guys, they don't even really realize the difference in that. They just think inflation bad.
Yeah, because it's the typical Keynesian of thought, right? Like, it's hard for people to not think that. I mean, it took me a while to get over it, because once I realized that Hex was similar to a Keynesian system, it kind of bothered me, but it works because it's controlled.
Yeah.
It's at a rhythm, a perpetual rhythm.
One quick thing I want to insert on inflation too is that, okay, so everything that we just talked about, now one thing that we're up against with the inflation is supply chain shock, which is something outside of the norm that you're usually dealing with inflation. So normally inflation can be fixed with just supply and demand curve, right? But if we've now got this new variable, which is you literally can't get these supplies, which creates a backlog all the way back up to the start line, that affects inflation very quickly, very badly. And so that needs to be taken into consideration, because we're talking about these rate hikes, right? And they can't get away with too much, because what's going to start to happen is it's going to still run away because of supply chain shock. So the inflation will still be going up as they're raising rates. Oh my God, could you imagine? That's what's going to happen next, because it has to. Because, China just went on another lockdown and they closed their ports.
Capital flows, bro. Capital flows. So that's how it works,
We can't get more supply right now. So how do you solve that? How do you actually fix that? You can't. So a rate cut is actually not going to do very much right now. Imagine that scenario.
Not at
We
all.
can't cut rates to solve the problem. We can't print money to solve the problem. How do you fix it?